Hi guys, Going Green Mom here with another Foodie Friday. Today we are going to make a dish that we call meat and greens in my house. Oddly enough, it is not in the Instant Pot for once. This is one we've been making for several years, and we used to make it just about once a week when we were getting the CSA share. But it's one that it gets to be fall. My kids are requesting it regularly because we do like it. So basically, it's all about layering flavors. So I'm going to start off with some diced onion. You could easily throw some garlic in here. If you've got other herbs, feel free to add them along the way, depending on what it is as to when you would want to add it. But then I'm also going to throw in some meat. Typically, I would use a salty meat, and the meat I'm using here doesn't really reflect that. But when I was still eating pork, we would often use like leftover ham, or I'd get some of like the pepperoni that comes more as a large stick, and I would chip pieces off of that. I've used regular pepperoni, just cut in half. Typically, that's often what we would do now. But I'm also having trouble sourcing turkey pepperoni. So I've got turkey breast, lunch meat on hand, so that's what we're going to use. Not the greatest on the histamine thing, but it is what it is. You could also use ground meat that you've got seasoned. You could use sausage. It's really kind of up to you. Just add a protein of your choice. If you are a vegetarian but eat eggs, this is great just as a vegetarian recipe, and you can throw a few eggs on top that you fried, and that is also good. Then after the meat, the next thing is root vegetables. So in this instance, I am using a sweet potato. I have used turnips. I've used radishes. I've used carrots. I could have done carrots this time too and didn't think about it. I do have those in here. I suppose you could probably toss in some celery at some point too, even though it's not a root vegetable. Just kind of whatever you like. And I expect something like rutabagas or kohlrabi. I don't know, probably even fennel if you like fennel. I'm not a licorice person. But you basically want whatever root vegetables you're using to be about the same size so that they will cook evenly. Kind of a common concept there, because, you don't want some to be super mushy and others just crunchy yet. Now, I am cooking this on the induction so you guys can see it. On my gas range, I would normally have this sort of a medium heat. And I am starting with a little bit of butter. You can use oil or whatever works for you. Now, I don't want to add this meat just because it is so thin right now, but I would typically go ahead and add most other meats that I would use in this dish now. Whatever meat you're using, you definitely want to have it cooked in advance. Although I suppose you could cook it with the onions here if you wanted to. Now, after the onions, garlic, meat, root vegetables, the last ingredient in this is the greens. Now you can use a wide variety of greens, and different ones will give a little bit different flavor profiles. I typically do use kale. We went through a period of trial and error on this to see what everybody in my family liked. And we all like kale. Some people thought Swiss chard was bitter. I am sensitive to the spinach due to the histamines. Also the turnip greens. Radish greens will give a little bit more peppery flavor. Use what you have and what your family enjoys. And as a sort of third thought on that, typically I would prefer homegrown kale. If not, I would prefer to grab like a bunch of kale from the store. In this instance, because it's the middle of winter, I can get bagged pre-chopped kale. That's what I can get, so that's what I'm using. If I was doing like a bunch of kale or kale out of the garden, I would take the stems out and cut them into about 1-inch chunks. And then after this mixture here has cooked about halfway, I would add the stems to this. Because they did not cut the stems out of this, and it would be very difficult for me to go through and pull little chunks of stem out, I'm not doing that. But I just like the sort of added crunch of the kale stems. They don't completely wilt down as much as the other kale, so you have a little bit of crunch, but not too much, and it just gives a nice texture to it. I do let the kale wilt a little bit, and then as I start stirring this in a little bit, I am adding water so that the kale leaves don't burn on the bottom of the pot. Typically the kale takes, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what type it is and that sort of thing. Sorry about the facial, you guys. But really just stir it up. I'm going to add some salt and pepper. And as soon as those root vegetables are done and the kale is the consistency you want it, that is really all there is to this meal. It is a good, flavorful meal. It's a great way to get your greens in. And, it passes my teenagers. They will request this meal, and I don't know a whole lot of kids you can say that about.
Supper's ready.